So obviously the angle here, as we mentioned, is going to be bringing him in to be the GM of Raw. But was there ever any consideration to bringing Eric in for anything beyond on-camera talent? He had been wow, just immediate.
No.
Nobody ever said, let's put him on the creative team or let's find an office position for him. Never.
Nope.
Why was it?
It was let's bring him in as a talent. Let's see how he does. Let's get to know him and find out what's there. He had a lot of baggage. So, I mean, unequivocally, that was ruled out, and that was made clear to Eric. It was also made clear to us that he's coming in as a talent only. He has no creative say-so in anything. He will be an on-air talent, and that's it.
Let me ask you, when you say he had a lot of baggage, I'm going to need you to give me some more detail there.
Well, people looked at Eric as the guy that tried to put us out of business. And Eric was the one that was leading the charge on the WCW side, kicked our ass for a long time, and was viewed as the enemy.
Hang on. Johnny Ace is with the company here. He was on the WCW side.
Yeah.
Well,
Johnny Ace wasn't the one making the decisions to do all that. Johnny Ace wasn't with the company when they were kicking our ass. Johnny Ace didn't make those personal statements about wanting to put Vince out of business and put the company out of business.
I guess here's what I don't understand. If it was business and everybody understands that it's business and everybody can say that we would have done it too, how is he this scum of the earth?
Because you're talking about the boys. You're talking about human beings here. We can, after the fact, you can look at it and say it's business, and you can get over that shit. People do it every single day. But there were still people that just held a grudge. There were people that had been fired by Eric that were working in the company that were like, fuck him. I don't want to work with him.
Well, no, I get that. But I guess what I don't understand is there's people in the company who have been fired by Stephanie and have been fired by Vince and have been fired by Jim Ross and Johnny Ace, and they're all still there. Did the company not see any? I mean, basically what you're saying is the company saw no significant value in Eric's ability to contribute behind the scenes.
No, what I'm saying is that there was no interest to bring him in any role other than a talent role. To bring him in, nobody knew him from our point of view. I didn't know Eric. Vince didn't know Eric. Stephanie didn't know Eric. JR had worked with him, didn't have a necessarily positive view of him. Other than that, there weren't a lot of people that had a lot of dealings with Eric from that side. The ones that did had a negative viewpoint of him, and most of them were wrestlers and people that had worked for Eric and had a negative experience. So to protect Eric as well, you bring him in as a talent, you put him on the same level as everybody else, and you let him ease his way in versus, oh, God, Eric Bischoff's in charge. Ooh, what the fuck? Is this going to be another their viewpoint of what it was at WCW? It was just simply to protect him and to say, you know what? We don't even want to discuss that yet. Let's bring you in here. Let's see what we got. See if it works out. See if you like us, if we like you, and then we'll go move on from there.
So, Freddie Prinze Jr. could contribute more behind the scenes than Eric Bischoff. Just want to be clear.
It's not what I said.
Okay, because that's what I heard. Do you think Eric enjoyed being on camera better? I say that because I know that you personally have enjoyed producing TV a great deal. But in our private time, you've told me it's a lot less stressful and there's probably a better quality of life on show day, just being talent, right?
And I can tell you for a fact from Eric to me that, yes, he did enjoy being a talent, not having the pressure of having to worry about all the other BS.
Yeah, I mean, because when you're a talent, you show up, you do your gig, and you're out of there. But when you're the office, that's not something you can put on and take off. It's 24/7, at least up there, right?
Oh yeah, everywhere, and it's just it's a huge weight off your shoulders. All you have to do is worry about your performance, and that's it.
I've always been fascinated by this tidbit. Bischoff wrote in his book that after he talked to Vince, Stephanie called. She said, quote, "Eric, I want you to know you've got a lot of heat with a lot of the boys. I'm not sure if you know what you're getting into." Did you know she was making this call, and was it a company decision to kind of give him the heads up that this is this is something he's going to have to deal with?
You know, I'll call it a McMahonism, but Vince always liked to hit you with shit like that.
Keep you on your toes.
Well, it's just letting you know, pal, you got a lot of heat there you got to overcome. And this was probably Stephanie's way of giving that message and to let him know that, hey, a lot of people hate you here. You're coming in. This isn't WCW, and you sure you really want to do this?
So let's talk about that for a minute. His TV debut was on Raw on July 15th, 2002. Vince called in May, so they've kind of been sitting on this for a little while. And this is much different from the way the call went a year prior, where it's a few days' notice. We've got months here. In between the call, where it's Vince, kind of working things out, and then Stephanie giving a heads up, were you guys writing alternate storylines and ideas to nail down the best way to bring him in, or had you always kind of envisioned the big hug scenario that we saw?
Well, we had the scenario of Vince basically endorsing him and bringing him in, but not everybody knew. Not everybody knew who it was going to be. So we were writing scenarios, and you had to be careful when there were other people in the room and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, the new GM will do this.
So who knew and who didn't know? I asked because I always thought this was a huge surprise that it was even hid from the boys, but Stephanie clearly knew because she gave him the heads up. We know Vince knew because he called. Nash called, so he knew. Who else knew? The head writers being Koski, and who else?
No, I don't even know if Koski knew. He might have known. But it was Brian Gewirtz, Michael, Heyman knew, I knew.
What did Hayes think about Bischoff coming in?
Michael was professional, but he wasn't happy about it. He had his own past with Eric. Eric had fired him. And I don't think Michael was happy about working with Eric again. He had a bad experience. And Dave.
Does Vince kind of ask anyone else's opinion before making this deal? You talked about on the last Nitro where he kind of polled the office before they did the purchase of WCW. Did something like that happen here?
Sure, he got everybody's opinion and their input on it. The funny thing was people that didn't even know Eric, had an opinion on it based on
rumor and innuendo.
Rumor and innuendo and shit. And I can speak for myself. I didn't know Eric. I know that I took a lot of the shit that he did very personally, and it affected my family. It affected me, and I, had that wall up. But at the same time, I tried to view it as, I don't know him. He's out there surviving. He's trying to do what he thinks best for the company over there, and he's taking care of his family. So I was like, you know what? Again, it's business. I could look back now because we were the winners. We're sitting in a good spot now. I can have that viewpoint of, you know what? He's trying to make a living. Come on in and let's see if we can do some business. So I didn't harbor any ill will. I didn't know Eric Bischoff other than meeting him one time in my life, and was willing to say, okay, man, yeah, let's make this work.
Do you remember anybody else being against it besides Michael Hayes?
Heyman was against it. Heyman didn't like it. He didn't feel that Eric would add anything to it. But at the same time, he was one of the ones that pitched, Eric earlier. So that was a weird dynamic. They weren't. Yeah, Heyman wasn't really necessarily overjoyed with it, but again, that was somebody that had worked with Eric before. Didn't have a good experience.
So on July 15th, Vince announces on Raw that the beginning of a new era is here for the WWE, and he's going to hire 2 general managers, one to run each of the flagship shows, both Raw and SmackDown. So we have our brand split. The Raw general manager is announced, and to the shock of everyone at home, it's Eric Bischoff. What was the reaction from the crowd, and is it the one you guys expected?
We expected shock, and we got shock. We got a holy shit moment. I don't think that anyone expected that, and it was the reaction that we wanted.
What was that day like for Eric? Did you guys hide him away in a bus somewhere to not spoil the surprise?
Yeah, it was long before buses. No, Eric was picked up and taken away to a separate hotel and picked up in a stretch limo. Got there to the building probably 40 minutes before he was to go out. Stephanie went out and met with him in the limo. He had his verbiage and everything that day. The limo driver brought it over to him that day, so he kind of knew what he was doing. And Stephanie went out and met with him. I don't think Vince even went out and met with him.
So were you present when Vince and Eric met for the first time, or did that happen on camera in front of everybody?
That happened. No, that happened backstage real quickly, right before they went out.
So in Gorilla?
Yes.
So you're in Gorilla, right?
Well, I went and we went and got him, introduced, hey, how you doing? Because we went right from the limo, right inside to get him up to Gorilla for the deal with Booker T, where he walked by Booker T and we did the quick reveal, that holy shit moment for TV. So I met him then, and I took him up to Vince.
What was the meeting like the first time Vince and Eric were together?
Hey, pal, how you doing? All right, you ready to go? Let's go have some fun. That was it. They went out there and did it.
Did you have a conversation with Vince after the fact? What was Vince's impression of meeting Eric for the first time?
Didn't really talk about it, man. We just went right from there, and I took him back, and I had all the pre-tapes with him. I actually wanted pre-tapes. They were all live that night, so we had a busy night.
What about?
So I just took him right from there, walked him through all the boys, and somebody yelled as he went through the backstage set, "Where's his bag? Find his bag!" You know, shit like that. Just kind of.
Do you know who yelled that?
Yes.
Who was it?
People. Actually a lot of, a few of them did.
Well, nobody shit in his bag that night, I don't think, did they?
No, he didn't have a bag.
Okay. So why don't you just tell us who yelled?
Seriously, it was almost like a fucking chant.
Yeah, people were ribbing.
Funny.
I got it.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story about the first time they met Vince McMahon. Did you ever hear Bischoff's account of what it was like to finally meet Vince after all this time?
No, not really. I think it was more after the fact. I was standing with Eric at the end of the night, and we were done. And he says, he goes, I've heard so much about the guy. And we were standing outside in the loading dock, and Vince and Stephanie and Linda and Shane were all getting into the car, getting ready to go home. And he says, he goes, I guess you can tell a lot about a man by the way that he is with his family. And he goes, I guess Vince isn't that bad after all. And he says, we're going to have some fun. And I just remember that moment because it was such a crazy fucking night.
Yeah.
And we were like all over the place, but I was the one that was basically anointed to work with Eric because I had no prior baggage with him. I never worked with him before. And I didn't care. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, yeah,
I'll do it.
We're here. We won. I'll do it. I don't give a shit. And
well, what was your impression of Eric after everything you had heard? How did he compare to what you had heard about Eric Bischoff?
He was obviously on his best behavior. He was nice as could be and very professional and did everything we asked him to do. Nailed it all. It was all live. We didn't have a whole lot of time to rehearse or go over shit. There were people that he knew from his stint at WCW and people he was meeting for the first time. So I think it was overwhelming for him that first night coming in, and we just hit him with a barrage of stuff, and I was just, bam, hitting him one right after the other.
We're going to run through the list of names of people he may have had an issue with, but do you remember that particular night? Did he have any fun reunions with guys he hadn't seen in a long time, or any awkward or uncomfortable moments that you recall seeing or hearing about?
No, and I was with him for pretty much from the moment he walked into the building until he left that night. So there were no awkward moments at all with anybody. And there were guys that came over and said hello, and for the most part, it was all open arms and welcoming him to the company. Everybody was professional and nice.
Bischoff wrote in his book that his promo that night was totally scripted. Who would have been in charge with writing Bischoff's promo there?
Brian Gewirtz.
Eric wrote in his book, I walked to the center of the stage and gave Vince a big hug, a very, very big hug. We milked it to the point where it was almost homoerotic. What must this have sounded like when Vince pitched this to Eric?
I don't think Vince did pitch it to Eric. I think that was just kind of an impromptu hug. It wasn't like a, God damn, pal, let's get out there and hug. Now, when we hug, we got to rub titties. It's going to be like vanilla titty on titty. And then grab my ass. I mean, grab it. Yeah, it just kind of happened. It was impromptu.
So the next night, Stephanie is announced as the new GM of SmackDown, and it's official. The brands are split. Bruce, was the goal here to try to simulate the Monday Night Wars a little bit with McMahon running one show and Bischoff running the other?
Yeah, I mean, the original whole scenario was simply the McMahon versus McMahon, but yeah, essentially it was kind of to simulate the Monday Night Wars competition, one brand versus the other.
Bringing in Bischoff was a total surprise, but the following week's ratings were pretty good, according to Meltzer. He said last week's show with Eric Bischoff was a definite success, doing 4.2 rating off hours of 4.1 and 4.5. The show opened at a 3.7, which is higher than usual, and a sign that the previous week's episode, which was Bischoff's debut, got people talking. The next week, Dave would even follow up with, all the shows since Bischoff came back have been good and well received. Do you remember Vince being pleased with the ratings and the way the angle's coming off on TV?
Yeah, I think we all were, because we'd built up to it so much. This whole brand split and who the GMs were going to be. I will say this, that amongst us, there was a bit of a higher power kind of deflation on the SmackDown brand with Stephanie. We all wanted two new. If we could have had two Bischoffs, I don't know who that could have been, but if we could have had that at that time, that would have been ideal.
What about Paul Heyman?
Heyman was already there, so
you wanted something
wouldn't have had
new.
as much impact.
Yeah.
Right. We wanted both of them to be new and impactful.
Pardon the pun. Meltzer also had this warning. There may be forces behind the scenes working to screw over Eric Bischoff already. Some feel the only reason Vince brought him in was to humiliate him in the end. Can you respond to that allegation? And to be clear, that's not Meltzer saying that it was Vince's intention, but he is saying that there are some within the company who felt that way and indicated that to him. Did you ever remember any sort of rumblings amongst the office or the boys that the only reason he signed him is to embarrass his ass?
Oh, I think there's a lot of people in the rumor and innuendo department that would go with the conspiracy theory that, the only reason he's bringing him in is to bring him down. But no, that wasn't a fact, and it simply just wasn't true. He was bringing him in to help the ratings and to do something with him. And if we could use him to better the brand, then he was going to do that.